Welcome to the Liver Alone podcast, the podcast where two nerds who consume a whole lot of horror discuss their favorite pieces of horror media. From movies and TV shows to video games, novels, and everything in between. Because this is a spooky world, and we're just thriving in it. I'm your host, Sarah, the survivalist in your slasher friend group that will put up a lasting fight, but inevitably die because only the final girl can survive.
And I'm your host, Ian, the fearless fighter in your slasher friend group that tries to save the day but ends up dying because physical strength just doesn't win in horror.
In today's episode, we're talking about the movie that spurred the inception of this podcasting, perhaps the inception of this podcast altogether, and my favorite movie of all time, Scream, from 1996. So Scream came out in 1996. It's basically a horror movie in the slasher genre, and it's not like a typical slasher that you think of, that you have a bad guy, he goes around, he kills people, he kills teenagers, and then, he's invincible. It's a little bit more on the nose, but in a clever way. It's like satire, so it's making fun of the slasher genre while also being a slasher, and it's done in such a really good way because, of course, there's a killer, but the killer is so close to being like human and an actual person because it is an actual person, which makes it even more spooky, I feel, at least in my opinion. And then the characters are really dynamic. They have a lot going on, and we'll talk about it in the episode, but it's basically a play on the slasher genre while also being a slasher. And it's really scary. It's super realistic. It's based on a true story, and it's just a really good piece of horror that I feel like no matter what year you watch this one, even though it's from 1996 and some people don't like watching old movies, if you watch it now, if you watched it 10 years ago, if you watched it 10 years from now, it's going to be good. And it's always going to be good because the storyline is just written so well. But highly recommend, obviously, as it's my favorite horror movie. We're going to get into the details of it. But before we do that, we're going to play a little game. And I would let you guys give us your opinion on social media. So follow us on liveralonepod wherever you are on social media. Let us know what you think about the names for this game kind of segment, because we're going to be starting off every episode with games, and they're going to be different games. So of course we're going to have different names for things, but what we have for now is playing a round of trivia after hours, creeping it real. I don't know if that's cheesy, but you guys let us know. So we're going to start off with trivia, and these trivia questions I'm going to be asking Ian because obviously I know the answers to them, so I can't answer them myself. And I think they're good ones. They're trivia questions specifically, obviously, of course, about Scream. So let's get to the first question. Are you ready?
I think so.
Do you think you're going to get them right?
Yeah.
Okay. I should preface by saying that Ian has seen this movie almost as much as I have seen this movie because I make him watch it constantly.
Every time we carve a pumpkin for Halloween, that movie's on.
You just have to. It's tradition.
It's tradition, yeah. Sometimes when we are about to go to sleep and we gotta put a movie on, we put on Scream.
That tells you.
Just gotta hear it in the background.
That tells you all you need to know about us going to sleep to a horror movie.
Yeah.
Okay, so question number 1. Which actress almost played the role of Sidney Prescott?
Was it Tori Spelling?
No, that's a good guess, but no.
All right, hold on, wait.
How many guesses should I give you? I'll give you 3 guesses.
Who almost played it? Was it Drew Barrymore?
Yeah, it was almost Drew Barrymore, and Drew Barrymore actually wanted the role of Sidney. I didn't exactly write down why it ended up not going to her, but I think Wes Craven saw Neve Campbell's performance in another movie that she came out with very recently, and he just liked her vibe a little bit more. But yeah, it was Drew Barrymore. You get a point for that one. You get 3 guesses. I'll give you 3 guesses for those kinds of questions. But this next one, you can only get 1 guess because it's a true or false. So, true or false? Yeah. Drew Barrymore, who plays Casey Becker, actually called the cops while filming her opening scene.
I'm gonna say true.
Yep, you're right.
She dialed 911.
She dialed 911
by accident.
I think. How do you do that by accident? First of all, but she dialed 911, and then maybe she realized it was an accident because she hung up. Obviously, they called back, and they did like a wellness check, or what is it? Welfare check?
Yeah.
They checked up on her and they called her back because her performance of being scared was so believable that the cops that she called were like actually concerned about her.
I mean, how do you dial 911 on when you're being recorded in a movie?
I have no idea.
On a fake phone?
How that even happened. Obviously, it was a real phone, right?
Yeah, that's
funny.
I didn't know that one. That's crazy. After all these years, I don't know.
Okay, so let's see. But you got it right, so good guess. Number 3. How many nights did it take to film the final scene of the movie?
It took one night because they were that good.
Okay, no. No.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on. I'm gonna say it took 10 nights.
10 nights, no.
More?
It was more than that.
All right. I'm not gonna say I'm on 20 nights.
You're close. It took 21 successive nights to film the final scene, which, by the way, was 42 minutes in total. That was like, I think I remember do you remember when we had that back in the virtual days where everything was done virtually in terms of events? There was a virtual event with the cast of the original Scream. I feel like someone said in that virtual event that it was the longest night of their life. And now it makes sense.
Now I remember.
Now it makes sense. Which, by the way, that event was really cool.
Oh, yeah, because it was like, what, deja vu over and over again, the same thing.
I mean, 21 nights to do one scene?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Question number 4. Someone actually got stabbed on set. Who was it?
It was Skeet.
Oh my god, yeah! Did you know that?
No, I figured he got stabbed because he was getting, like, they were really hitting him hard. Like, I mean, you would expect one of the people that got killed in the movie, but I think I believe it was him because the way that they were like poking each other at the end of the movie. I was like, somebody's got to get hurt, even if it's not like an actual weapon. They probably got hurt like with the piece of wood or the plastic.
Yeah, that makes sense. And back in the days, they were doing all sorts of like crazy tactics to get the scene right. That's it. That's the exact scene that is where he got hurt. So he actually had open heart surgery as a child, and the second stab of the umbrella tip, when Sydney like stabs him in that one spot, it missed the protective vest that he was wearing and it hit him right in the spot, I guess, where he had like that surgery. Basically, the reaction that he had
was
real. I bet you Neve Campbell was like, what the hell? Or maybe she didn't even realize. She was just like, yeah, no, that's you
good
did
acting.
Great.
Good acting.
Great acting. Okay, last question. A main character got casted into their role by accident. Who was it?
It was Gale Weathers.
No.
Courtney Cox? All right, it wasn't Courtney Cox.
No, it wasn't Courtney Cox.
Was it the police chief or something like that? Like he was the actual chief and then they just made him? Or the
No.
Lillard?
It was!
It was Lillard?
How are you getting these? That is so funny. Okay, he was with his then girlfriend at the time who was going to audition for something else, and I guess they were like in an area, and he was stopped by a casting director and was literally approached for the audition, and he was told that he was not the right guy to be Billy because he just didn't look like the right guy to be making out with Neve Campbell at the time, and they told him, why don't you come in for the best friend? Which is so funny because he ends up dating Neve Campbell
in real life. Yo, I didn't even know that.
2 years after Scream.
Oh crap! I didn't even know that happened. Yo,
I also didn't know that. Like when I was looking up these trivia questions, I found that out, and I was like, "Wow, I did not know that." They dated for 2 years, which is so funny because you see them now, and they're like really good friends now.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just they casually dated after Scream.
So wait, after Scream, then they dated during Scream, or after?
I think
2
it was.
years?
I think it was afterward, or maybe like right afterward. It's funny because it's Do you remember the scene at the end when he dies? And he's like, I always had a thing for you.
Yeah.
That is so funny. I wonder if he put it in on purpose. That's our Trivia After Hours, Creeping It Real. Again, let us know if that's cheesy. We're going to get into the discussion of Scream. And we have a lot of thoughts, or at least I have a lot of thoughts, and I'm sure you do too. Let's start by talking about why we decided to pick this piece of content. We obviously know, I've said it a million times, this is my favorite horror movie, so of course we had to talk about it. It's also the the name of the podcast is spurred from this movie. It's a quote that was said by Stu, who's played by Matthew Lillard in the movie. But why exactly is this my favorite movie? So the first time that I ever saw this movie, I think I was 11, and I actually wasn't home. I went to visit family members in Florida, and it was a really, really hot day. Nobody wanted to go out. Everybody wanted to stay inside in the cool AC, and we were kind of just chilling in the middle of the day. So it was like super bright, sunny day. And my cousin was straightening my hair for the first time. Don't know why I remember that. Maybe because it was the first time. But she's like, let's watch a movie while I do your hair. And she puts this movie on. And I don't know what it was, but I was completely obsessed from the second that she turned this movie on. In my head, as an 11-year-old, I was just constantly thinking of the different theories as to who the killer was going to be. And I think that's like part of the charm of this movie is that you feel like anybody can be the killer in this movie. So I was just thinking about it the entire time. And I have to go on record and say that I thought Billy was the killer from the get-go. But by the end, when we realized that there's two killers, that really got me. And I don't know, just the whole makeup of this movie really, really impressed me from that same moment when I was 11 years old, that when I came home from that Florida trip, I wanted to watch it again, and I watched it again and again. And as you know, we continue to watch it. We watch it every single year, multiple times a year. And there's always something new to learn about this movie because it was so cleverly done. Like I said in the beginning, in terms of the synopsis, there is like so many hidden bits that play into what slashers are all about in such a clever way that it's not cheesy, it's not corny, it's not superficial. It's like a really, really well done movie in the slasher genre. And that just sticks with me. And so that's why it's my favorite movie. I feel like I constantly am learning something new about it, and it just makes me appreciate it so much more. That was really long-winded.
So I saw it maybe 97. Because at that time, my cousin was way older than us, like about 15 years older. So he was going and like renting movies and stuff. So when this movie came out, it was really big. Like it had good reviews in the box office and everything. So he was renting whatever movie was good. So he rented it one day. We were sitting down watching it, and I was like, "What the hell?" Like we would watch horror movies. We would watch like Halloween and other older horror movies. But when this came out, we were like, "This is like really weird," because it was like I wasn't in high school yet. My brother's in middle school, so I was like, "All right." We didn't know how people live in California. We're like, "Oh, this is California," and where was it? California?
I think so.
At this point, it was like we're in New York, and over here it's like, oh, they're in high school. They got cars. They got their house. They're home alone. I was like, when can I do that? So that really impacted me because I was like, when I grow up, I want to do that too. But I was like, I want to have to be involved with like like murder and stuff. So of course So I was young. So I was like, it was like a learning thing for me. It wasn't just horror. It was like, this is how people act with each other. This is your best friend, but then your best friend is like double crossing you. And then like how I was like, is this what the world's gonna be when I get older?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I didn't think about it like when you're watching these kinds of movies when you're so young and you have no idea what to expect, especially high school. High school is like the great unknown. Yeah. So when you're watching all these movies and they're all set in high school, you're like, oh my God, this is going to be my high school experience. I mean, hopefully not in this case, but that's true.
The cell phones too. I was like, cell phones, what the hell is that? They were drinking. Like it was all weird to me. Like, cause I wasn't doing any of this stuff yet. So it was like it really like made me like come of age to see what is what's gonna happen later on in my life. Yeah. Boyfriends and girlfriends. How do you act when somebody gets killed? When your dad's not around? Like and also my parents were together in this movie. Her parents are her mom died. Yeah. So it's like single father, and how do you deal with that? And then like the sexism in it too. So it really was like a learning. It was not just like horror, it was like learning.
Yeah, I didn't think about it in that way where it's kind of like it is a coming of age if you're watching it in a time where you don't really know what it's like being of that age. And each of the characters are dealing with such different things. Like you have Sydney who is dealing with the loss of her mom. Her kind of dad is the only one that's really there for her. She's the only child kind of thing. And then you go to school and you have to deal with regular school things. Like your boyfriend wants to have sex with you for the first time. And there's like crazy shit going on. Like somebody gets murdered that's in your history class, and then next thing you know, other people are getting murdered and stuff like that. It's a really, really strange look into the high school experience, especially watching it at a young age, which I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to our podcast can probably resonate with the fact that they saw like these deeply disturbing but really relatable type of movies when they were a young age.
Like the sexism too, like she's a woman, and even now a woman could take on more things and like more conflicts and social things. Like I, even growing up, I couldn't take care of that. Like with her mom is dead, and then these people are running around trying to kill her, then the killer is going straight after her, calling her, and then her dad is gone. So it's like, it shows you how strong a woman is.
Yeah.
At the same time as making her like the final girl. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like,
she's a strong character.
She's a very strong. Yeah.
Yeah. She as in Sydney Prescott is the main character, our final girl. She is a really, really strong character, and I think she's like one of the best final girls out there. She's obviously my favorite final girl, but there's something about her where it's like her strength doesn't come from being automatically, because she's a virgin, because she sticks to her studies. Like, there are times where she's not sticking to her studies. She's not like that stereotypical nerdy girl or like innocent child. Like, she does have a bit of edge to her. At the same time, she is final girl material. When I say the extreme, I mean like Carrie in that example. She's more of like in the between.
Yeah, she's not
and
like a
she
nerd.
does want to have sex. Like, she does want to do all of these things, and she's not necessarily interested in being 100% innocent. And then her mom dies, and she's dealing with like a whole lot of trauma, and it seems like everybody around her forgets the fact that she's dealing with this ginormous traumatic event, and they're just like living their life, and she seems like the outlier, even though she's the one that is literally dealing with the death of a parent. Like, none of her peers are dealing with anything of the sort. And it's kind of interesting also because Billy goes at her for that reason, which kind of shows your point about like women and strength and tolerance. Like, Billy's losing his goddamn mind over a divorce, meanwhile she's there like dealing with the death, the murder, and she had to go to trial for that too.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
I mean, the way that she acts in the movie too is like great. Like, you could see it in her face that she's always like thinking about how her mom is dead.
Yeah,
like they're all partying and laughing, and she does like a smile, like a half smile. The acting in this movie is for the time.
Yeah, the acting was great.
Really, it wasn't like that 70s where they
cheesy.
So it's like really good.
It's true.
Even when you have Stu over there acting like a jackass, it's still.
Oh my gosh.
Classic.
It feels like when you're watching them that everything is so kind of innate. Like, they are the character, which is interesting because like it feels like it free flows from Matthew Lillard for him to just be like a psycho.
He could just act like
he just acts like a psycho.
He looks like he's acting like himself.
Yeah. And it's so funny because he actually said in an interview, I don't know how long ago this interview was, but he said like watching back the movie, he's like, what the hell? I'm like at a 200%. I really needed to scale it back. I was really, really intense in that movie. And he actually doesn't like the fact that he's so intense, but that's what made him such a good character. Billy is the killer. I would consider him the quote unquote main killer because he's the reason why this got implanted in Stu's head to begin with, because the two of them are buddies. But Billy has trauma, right? His trauma is from, the divorce of his parents because Sydney's mom had an affair with his dad. So he has a reason, even though it's a shitty reason, he has a reason to be doing these killings. Stu has absolutely no reason to be killing anybody.
Because that's his friend.
He's just friends with Billy.
So he is crazy.
So he's like way crazier.
Yeah, but at the same time, remember when he started crying? Like he did. Like they thought it was a game.
He was crying because he was getting in trouble.
He didn't want to get in trouble. I mean,
with his parents.
Yeah.
Not even with the cops. He was just like, screw the cops.
Yeah.
My mom and dad are going to be mad at me.
I mean, that's how I used to feel too.
I mean, you're a teenager at the same time.
Yeah, even at that time, you're like, oh,
he's
crap.
a teenager.
If my mom and dad find out, then I'm going to feel bad. But if everybody else finds out, I'm like, all right.
It just shows like the...
Psychotic.
Seriously
and
psychotic.
again, that's the thing with the sexism. It's a boy. A boy. He's not a man. He's a boy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he's not an adult. He's not an adult.
He's not developed, and yet he's out there like
just killing people. Like,
killing people. I think that's what makes a lot of this movie super, super scary, because a lot of people are not going to think that Scream is scary, right? Because it's a slasher. It's just like a string of murders in a small town. Okay, that's kind of generic. It's not something like Hereditary where you're like deeply, deeply disturbed. It's a little bit more surface level, but there's something really, really terrifying about this movie in that it is so close to reality that it can literally be a piece of nonfiction. It could happen in any day. And it's actually inspired by a real life string of killings in Florida. I believe it was a string of killings from a Floridian serial killer. So that just also goes to show how close to reality this could be, and how brutal reality can be, how gruesome reality can be. If we think about the first scene with Drew Barrymore hanging from the tree, that is a scene that is going to stick in my head forever. It's so freaking creepy. As an 11-year-old, I mean, I couldn't see anything else.
Yeah.
When I closed my eyes, I couldn't see anything else for weeks because that scene was so disturbing.
The boyfriend too, he said, now he gets killed. Does he get his neck?
I think he's gutted also.
Yeah, he's got it also.
Yeah.
That's the thing. So back then when they were doing all these movies, it was like let's be over the top and show a lot of blood and gore. This movie is like they have one scene with the gore and then everything else is like somebody gets stabbed. It doesn't go to that over the top level that it becomes comedic, and that's a good thing. That's why if they would have done a lot of guts and all that and everything, like blood, like the amount of blood like all over the place too, they cut back on it, and that's why it's like so real, true to life.
That's true. And now that you say that, I think I keep remembering little bits of fun facts that I've read over the years. I feel like they said there was hardly any actual killings in this movie. It was like maybe a handful of people throughout the entire movie, but we think about movies like Saw where there's so much blood, so much death, and so much like kill count. The horror comes in other ways, not just from the killings, which in my opinion, that's what makes like a really good horror. It's not just from like the shock value. But I also wanted to mention there were a bunch of references in Scream. Again, it's a satire, so I feel like it had to have a bunch of references to other horror movies to kind of like play into the whole like we're making fun of horror movies while being a horror movie. Halloween, I think in the beginning, well, of course, the killer's name is Billy Loomis, and Loomis is from Halloween. The
doctor, I think, or the psychiatrist?
The psychiatrist from
Halloween, who's taking care of
from Halloween.
Michael.
Then there are references to Nightmare on Elm Street. We see Wes Craven cleaning the high school. He's like the high school janitor. And his name is Freddy. I think he's like, Freddy, what are you doing? He says, Freddy, what are you doing? And then he's wearing the infamous sweater that Freddy Krueger wears. So that was another reference. There's The Exorcist. There's I believe Tatum, when she's having a conversation with Sydney, she says something like another Wes Carpenter film. So she's making fun of Wes Craven and John Carpenter from Halloween. So there's just so many references. There are tons of them. And like I said, whenever we watch this movie, there's always one little thing different that I notice. And speaking of things that I notice each time, I remember it took me maybe 50 watches of this movie. For me, one day I was sitting in the apartment by myself. This was the apartment back in like 2014. Yeah. I was sitting and I had it playing in the background, and Randy is played by Jamie Kennedy. He's sitting on the couch when all of his friends go to see the principal who's dead, kind of hanging in the football stadium, whatever they call it. And he's there by himself. He's watching the horror movie with Jamie Lee Curtis. And he says, Jamie, look behind you. Jamie, look behind you. Something like that. Yeah, look behind you, Jamie. And I didn't notice it all the other times I was watching this movie. I was just like, he was talking to Jamie on the TV screen. But I had walked away during the scene and I was just listening to it. And then I was like, wait a second. He's Jamie too. So that was like the joke. Like look behind you. He was telling himself, but also telling Jamie on the TV screen. Yeah. When I figured that out, I felt so stupid because I saw the movie like a bajillion times before this. But it was also like, oh my God, this movie is so freaking smart for them to put those two together. That particular character from another final girl from another movie with Jamie Kennedy sitting on the couch. It was perfect. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the characters. I guess we can call these the core characters, just as now we're calling this new generation of Scream the core characters. So the core characters in the original are Sidney Prescott, our final girl, Tatum, who is Sydney's best friend, Randy, who is kind of like the nerdy best friend who kind of tags along with everything, Stu, who is one of the killers as we find out and is also the best friend of Billy, who is the main killer and is also Sydney's boyfriend, Gail, who is like the infamous reporter in this small town and she's like obsessed with getting this story, and then Dewey, who is the town cop who falls in love with Gail and is also the sibling, the brother of Tatum.
Dewey, in this movie, we thought he was stupid. And he was doing a lot of he was supposed to be like, was he supposed to be like comic relief for the movie too? Or he was supposed to be like the dorky cop?
Maybe.
From back in the, because I'm like, think of it like, remember like Twin Peaks?
Yeah.
Like they would have weird cop. So I think at this point they were trying to figure out his character and like see who he was. And I mean, he became, we know what happens to him later on. He becomes like one of the best characters. But in this movie, he's there. We don't care if he lives or dies. Yeah. I mean, that's my opinion. But
I think for me, he was like endearing and he was like one of the nice guys. So I liked him. And there was a point where I actually thought he was one of the killers. But that was just me like theorizing everybody. But he's just like a nice guy. And I thought that was kind of like a trick at first. And that he would eventually become like a bad guy or something. But we come to know that, again, he's just a nice guy and he continues to be a nice guy throughout the entire series. So
yeah, I mean, you need that in a movie. All right, let's talk about Gail. So
Gail, oh my God.
You realize that she's done so many cases like this and like read a lot because she's like a journalist. She knows what's going on. Mm-hmm. So she is actually one of the smartest people there. You hate her and love her at the same time?
I find it interesting that she ends up being like one of the core characters because I really, really did not like Gail. Gail is fine. And I like that she's super independent and I like that she has like an identity and she like has her own interests and passions and stuff like that. And that's what I really, really like about her the most. But aside from that, she's not super pleasant for most of the series until maybe like the third one where she ends up being kind of like
hero?
Endearing in her own way. And then I kind of ended up being like, okay, you're cool, you're funny, like your personality is kind of like taking its form now. But for the first two movies, I really didn't like her.
Yeah, she was always cursing all the time, like angry.
She was just like super angry. She was just
angry. Like, and she was like narcissist, right? She's like,
and very narcissistic.
Yeah, she was like, it's all about me.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, it was always about her in her world, right? Yeah. Throughout the entire series, but she becomes endearing as time goes on, I guess.
Tatum. So when I first saw this movie and I saw Tatum, I was like, "This, she's crazy." Like what? I was like, "This is how people act." Like, I think they wanted to make her like the stereotypical dumb blonde. So I was like, she was helping Sydney, and you wanted her a little bit of point. You wanted her to live because she looked like she was really helping Sydney, but at the same time, like she was like an extra character. Like you didn't care about because. There was little scenes that she was helping her, but then you're like, oh, that's her friend. Her friend is going to help her. I really thought that both of them were going to be at the end of the movie and they were going to like fight together, but she was doing such stupid things.
I thought that she was going to last longer than she did, for sure. Yeah. But I don't think that she was like a dumb blonde. I think she was more forgiving when it came to the guys. She's basically like, I'm going to ignore them. They're just silly guys. It's fine. It is what it is, because she was too busy having fun, like living her life. But she was actually pretty smart, and I think the way that she carried herself was, like, very intelligently. It's just that she didn't care. Like, she was very, like, surface level about everything, and even though she cared about Sydney, like, she didn't care enough to be asking her, like, the deeper questions and taking things seriously. And unfortunately, that was to her demise, because she was making jokes to the very end. She had potential to be, like, a final girl, because she wasn't, like, stupid.
And she fought back, so I was like...
But she just wasn't paying attention.
But I guess they did it in such a way to show you how psychotic Stu is. To go and kill his own girlfriend.
Oh, yeah.
For no reason.
Yeah.
No reason, like, what? Like,
remember when Randy was like, there's always some bullshit reason to kill your girlfriend?
Yeah.
It was like, I think that scene was right before they ended up going to the party, and then he goes and he kills his girlfriend.
Yeah. So Randy I would say he is one of the best characters.
Yeah.
And spoiler... He does get killed in part 2.
I don't think it's a spoiler at this point.
Spoiler from 20 years ago? No. I don't know why they killed this guy. He was like the best character. But it's like you have to... If you know so much, then how? Then there's like no way to kill you, but they got him. And he is like, I think he is the comic relief because he does all kind of like impressions and stuff. So you're like, this guy's a Joker. So you don't believe that he's gonna live. He's the guy that you want to be in the movie. You like us, like we, like like what we're doing now. He's inspiring us because basically he knows everything about every horror movie, and then he dissects it.
Yeah.
And he knows the details. He knows who's gonna do what. But I guess obviously everybody comes to an end.
I think Randy is definitely a fan favorite. And I won't talk about my feelings about Scream 2, but I agree with you when it comes to the death of Randy. I think Randy is awesome. I don't think there's anything to dislike about Randy. I think maybe he's a little bit naive, but at the same time, it's also in an endearing way. I think all of these characters are endearing in their own way. And he's the closest character to us. And I think that's what makes him so lovable. He's so freaking funny. He ad-libs a lot in this movie, which tells a lot about how funny he is. I heard that he made Wes Craven laugh constantly. He knew everything, and he was always spot on about all of the things. He talked about red herrings. He made a lot of the movie references that we love to hear in other movies when it comes to like watching satires. He tells us the rules, and these rules are like written in stone at this point. It's just classic.
And it happens. It follows through.
It always follows through. He makes like the funniest little scenes that you will never forget.
He's the nerd that has a crush on Sydney.
Yeah.
That's what he's there. That was his character. He was like, he's like, I'm going to try to get the girl. But obviously he never gets with her. That
death was like a really, really impactful one in terms of the other core characters. But we'll talk about that in Scream 2, I guess.
Stu? Yeah, let's talk about Stu. So Stu is Sarah's favorite character. No. Stu is, when I saw Stu, my first impression was like, this guy is a jackass.
Yeah.
Because he's just, obviously he was my favorite character because you see how I act right now. I act like I want to be the Joker too. Like every movie needs that Joker. Every friend group needs that Joker. And I mean, he goes over the top. He goes over the top bit. Joking. I mean, I wish in the movie that he was there like longer, and I wish I wish he wasn't a killer, but it's like the best person. You know what I mean? Because
literally, yeah, he is I feel like he's the best person to play exactly who he played. Not the main character who had trauma, but the character who was just like, I'm gonna kill for the shits and giggles of it. My best friend is killing people, so let me just tag along. That's how good he was at his character to the very end. He even had a joke at the very end, like seconds before he died. Yeah. And you're right, he is my favorite character. It took me a long time to establish him as my favorite character, but as I continue to watch the movie, he's just the best. He's crazy. He's like, he has so much personality. And even though like in that realm, you can say that Randy could be like anyone's favorite character. There's something a little bit extra, a little sparkle about Stu that makes him stand out as movies continue to come out. There's no killer nowhere close to how crazy that he is, and it's just like nobody's ever gonna top that. Not even Billy, even though Billy is probably a lot of people's favorite killers. Like, I think he's the best killer out of the series.
Yeah, it was like he was the Joker.
Yeah.
Like, when he's such crazy, like killer crazy, he's still funny. And he's saying jokes with it, but he's saying it serious. And his face is serious, but you're fucking saying something funny.
And it's disturbing. It's like disturbingly funny.
Disturbing funny. You're like, what?
Like, he's saying things.
But you just love it. You love it.
Yeah. At the same time, it's like murdering people, stabbing people. Like, you just stab your friend for like the fakes of it. Like when they were stabbing each other, him and Billy were stabbing each other. And he was making jokes, and it's like, dude, you are out of your mind.
Yeah, like they're desensitized about the killing, but it was great. He was a great.
I think that's what makes him such a good killer. Is that how he's so desensitized and he's just like killing. Yeah. And I think we'll talk about this like in the new Scream, like the requel. But I feel like they mirrored a lot of his personality onto Amber, but it just couldn't compare. Like, he's the best at being able to nail that personality. Yeah. I think Wes Craven, how do I remember all these random facts? But I think Wes Craven said that they really, really liked Matthew Lillard for this role because he was so freaking intense in his role, which is funny to think that he did not like it. Matthew Lillard himself didn't like it, but we love it.
Yeah, he did something great there.
He really did, and he didn't even realize it.
I've never seen another character like that, and you can't say like Batman Joker. You can't say that. It's in a different level.
So different.
Real life.
Yeah, it's so close to reality. That's another reason why I really, really like Scream, is like it doesn't go over the top. It knows it's subtle in just the perfect way.
Billy is the typical, stereotypical boyfriend.
Mm.
And you don't, and you, I mean, he doesn't say stupid. He doesn't, that's stupid. Like, he doesn't say
Kind of.
like.
He's like a movie nerd almost.
Yeah, because he was talking about a lot of movies of like, he's like mad, like slick, like smooth.
Yeah,
Like you don't, I wouldn't think that he's a killer either. Like you wouldn't think he was nice, or he was nice to her, like when they were like talking and stuff. But and he was nice at certain things. But when you see him in the was it Blockbuster?
Yeah.
the video store.
The video store.
When you see him in the video store, he's like, then you're like, what's wrong with this guy?
Yeah.
But I guess from being accused, you would act the same way.
Yeah. He's very broody. He's very mysterious. And I think that's why a lot of the girls in the school like him, because he's so mysterious and kind of cool. But he's really kind of a nerd. Like, all he does is talk about movies. There's so many moments, and you don't realize that. Like, Billy only talks about movies, which is funny because Randy does that too. But Randy has a bit more of a personality, honestly.
And they call him a nerd.
Yeah.
This guy's a...
But he's doing the same exact thing, minus any personality, to be honest. He just sticks around with his friend Stu, and everybody thinks that he's, like, so cool. I guess during that time period, people really loved mysterious guys with hair in their face. And that was just like the thing.
Yeah, I can't do that. 90s.
I don't know. Like, aside from him being the OG killer, he doesn't really stand out aside from that. Aside from being, like, Sydney's boyfriend, which was also disturbing on another level.
Yeah.
Like, he had a relationship with her. He was doing things with her. And then he went and he just, like, killed all her friends and tried to kill her. And killed her mom. So that's also really disturbing on his level. I think that's interesting to think about when we start thinking about the requels and how they're developing him now.
Yeah, now they're getting his personality out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. All right, so let's talk about the best of the best, the final girl, Sydney Prescott. Okay, you first.
All right, so Sydney Prescott. During this time when I was watching movies, the sexist stuff, like, oh, she's weak, she can't do anything, she was kicking ass the whole movie.
Yeah.
She was like a combination of Randy, because she learned what Randy said, and she was using that. Because, like, where did she get this from?
Maybe.
To, like, fight like that.
She's just, like, super strong-willed in her own sense. Like, her dad wasn't even around for the whole movie.
Yeah.
She didn't really have a figure that was... She was the mom of the group, if you think about it.
So I guess she was, like, the most...
She was just super mature and independent. Like... She's very strong in her mental space. Like, even though she was struggling... She was still functioning, and she was still being super responsible and going on and taking care of shit, getting shit done. Taking
care of everybody.
And at the same time having a boyfriend, at the same time dealing with a string of murders that were connected to her mom's. Like, she was juggling a lot of things, and she was holding a lot of weight, and she was still getting it done. Like,
yeah, I guess she had to, because everything was on her now, because...
Yeah.
Everything's on her because the killer was going after her, so she's like, she had to take it upon herself to do everything.
Yeah. I wouldn't say she's on any extremes when it comes to stereotypical final girls. You have someone like Laurie Strode who's super nerdy and she's to herself and she's a goody-good girl. Then there are people who are a little bit more edgy and they're kind of like punk, rock, in your face, intense. And she's somewhere in between. Like, you can see she wants to do things that her friends are doing, but at the same time, she is responsible and she doesn't seem to have a problem with being responsible. Like, she enjoys being responsible as well and being the mom person in the group. So I like that. I like that she's in between, and like, she doesn't need to show her tits in order for people to look at her. Like, people take her seriously and people actually like her without her being too flashy. At the same time, like, people respect her and she has like a group of friends and she's doing her own thing. So I like that a lot about her.
Go out and see this movie if you haven't seen it.
I mean, you don't have to go out.
You don't have to go out. Yeah, you don't have to go out. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's what people say. Like, go out.
Yeah.
Oh no, my head is back in the VHS.
We're back in the 90s.
Yeah. This movie is in the dictionary. You look up Scream in the dictionary. It says 1996. It teaches you about horror and how the way to write a horror based on other horrors that are. I mean, it can't be done again. I'm gonna tattoo him on my body.
Okay, that's bold. You're gonna tattoo like the character, or
no, I'm gonna tattoo a ghost face.
Like,
I gotta have a ghost
mask?
face. Yeah, I gotta have a ghost face on.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I might end up doing that too.
But that's how important he is to us.
Absolutely. We named the podcast about this movie because it's such an impactful movie. And I think from the topic of it, like you said, it's not something that can be replicated, and it definitely can't be replicated well. We've seen so many satires. We watched satire last night, and it's nothing can compare because the subtlety of it was done so well that, you know, like, it's hard for other movies to be able to do something just as subtle but effective as what we see here. And even in the sequels, we don't see it just as perfectly as you do in the first one, at least in my opinion. I think in our opinion, I know a lot of people like some of the sequels more than the original, but in our opinion, I think the original is the best. And it's just brilliant. You have to see it. Like I said, if you're watching it now, you're not going to feel like it's dated. You're not going to feel like you're watching something super old and boring and corny and cheesy. It feels just as new as the Scream that came out this year. And we have a question to the audience about this. So find us on social media. We're on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, of course, at liveralonepod. And the question that we have for you this week is, who is your favorite character from Scream across all of the movies? All of the sequels, new, old, whichever it may be, let us know. But thank you so much for listening. If you like today's episode and you want to hear more from us, do us a favor and leave us a rating on whatever platform that you're listening to us on. It really helps the show, and it helps us continue creating more episodes for you. And I know we're at the beginning, but every little bit helps. And we're just excited to release the rest of this season. Tune in next Wednesday because we're going to be talking about Scream, I know, again. But this time we're fast forwarding 25 years to the requel, and we'll talk about what the heck a requel is from 2022. But for now,
We'll see you in the kitchen with a knife.